They say prophecy isn't history written in advance. They say it's poetry, metaphor, a whisper from an ancient realm not meant to be taken literally. But every time the earth trembles in the Middle East, every time ancient alliances shift like tectonic plates, that whisper becomes a roar. And today, the world stands once more at the edge of something vast, something terrifying. As missiles fly between Israel and Iran, and as Russia steps from the shadows to take a position of bold alignment, many are beginning to ask a question long buried in the dusty scrolls of forgotten prophecy. Is the war of Gog and Magog about to begin? For those unfamiliar, Ezekiel chapters 38 and 39 present a vision received by the prophet Ezekiel, detailing a massive end-times invasion of Israel by a confederation of nations led by Gog of the land of Magog. This alliance is said to include Persia, modern-day Iran, Cush, Put, Gomer, and the house of Togarmah. But it's the mention of a mysterious northern power that has drawn the attention of scholars, mystics, and strategists alike. Many have speculated for decades that this northern force is none other than modern-day Russia. Until recently, such speculation was confined to pulpits and fringe documentaries. But as Iran and Russia draw closer through military cooperation, arms deals, and shared enemies, the script of Ezekiel seems less like ancient mysticism and more like a geopolitical forecast. Just weeks ago, a new military cooperation pact was signed between Tehran and Moscow, allowing Russian forces access to Iranian bases and offering mutual support against perceived Western aggression. And then came the strikes, Israel's calculated bombing of Iranian facilities suspected of enriching uranium, followed by Iran's retaliatory barrage not only at Israel but at US-linked sites in Syria and Iraq. Suddenly, the map of alliances began to mirror a 2,500-year-old prophecy. But let us ask the forbidden question, what if this isn't just politics? What if behind the thrones and missiles lies a deeper design, hidden from public view but encoded in ancient scripture? What if Gog and Magog are not only kingdoms, but spiritual archetypes, powers that manifest through willing vessels, waiting for the appointed time to unleash their fury upon the world? Consider the eerie accuracy of the nations listed in Ezekiel 38 when compared to current geopolitical alignments. Persia, of course, is Iran. Cush and Put are believed by many scholars to correlate with regions in North and East Africa. Gomer and Togarmah, often associated with parts of modern Turkey and Eastern Europe, are also increasingly tilting toward anti-Western postures. And above them all, a great northern power with hooks in its jaw is drawn into the fray. Russia, with its historical ambition for Middle Eastern influence, now seems poised to fulfill that role. But who or what is Gog? A person? A code name? Or a spirit that takes hold of leaders to drive them toward prophetic destiny? We know that Russia has long sought control or influence over energy corridors in the Middle East. But in recent months, something has changed. The tone has darkened. Moscow has not only condemned Israel's strikes, but has begun openly discussing joint military action with Tehran under the guise of regional stability. There are even whispers that Russian advisors are helping Iran develop defensive systems modeled after the feared S-400 platform. Why now? Why this sudden boldness? Some say it's retaliation for NATO's eastward expansion and the continued proxy war in Ukraine. But others believe this is spiritual retaliation, a pushback against what they perceive as a Western world order infected with apostasy and moral decay. The alignment between Russia and Iran, then, is not just strategic, it's ideological, it's eschatological. And then there's Israel, small in size, massive in significance. In the eyes of Ezekiel, it's the target, the land of unwalled villages, a people gathered from the nations. Never before in history has that description fit so precisely. Since its rebirth in 1948, Israel has become a paradox, surrounded by enemies yet thriving, vulnerable yet invincible. And in the center of this paradox lies Jerusalem, the spiritual fault line of the world. In recent weeks, Israeli leadership has warned of a coming multi-front war, unlike anything seen before. Defense systems are being stretched thin, and civilian drills are ramping up. What does the Mossad know that the world does not? Could it be that the leadership of Israel, both religious and military, is preparing for a war not only of missiles and troops, but of prophecy fulfilled? One cannot ignore the role of Turkey in this equation. President Erdogan has long positioned himself as a new sultan, reaching toward pan-Islamic unity and resisting Western influence. Though Turkey is a NATO member, its actions suggest a divided loyalty. If Turkey, along with Iran and Russia, were to form even a loose confederation, we would see the heart of Ezekiel's prophecy beating in real time. But the battlefield may be broader than we imagine. While eyes are focused on missile trails and tank movements, a different kind of war is being waged, a war of perception, of narrative, of control over human consciousness. The media acts as the new pulpit, and the internet as the new temple. Who controls what people believe, controls what they are willing to die for. And in this war, ancient symbols and spiritual archetypes are being resurrected to justify what comes next. Could it be that the Crimson Pact, the unspoken but undeniable agreement between Russia and Iran, is not merely a convenience of nations, but a signal, a declaration that the stage is now set, that the time has come for the final chess moves? Some suggest that these nations are being drawn into conflict not by ambition, but by divine compulsion. As Ezekiel writes, "I will put hooks into your jaws and bring you out with your whole army." Are we witnessing the fulfillment of a prophecy that predates modern borders and ideologies? Or are we, in our hunger for meaning, forcing history to repeat itself? The line between fulfillment and fabrication has never been thinner, and still the pieces move. Jerusalem prepares, Tehran rallies, Moscow watches, and the rest of the world waits, watching skies for fire, reading headlines like omens, and wondering if the words of an ancient prophet have at last found their echo in our time. Part 2 will delve deeper into how economic systems, artificial intelligence, and spiritual deception may all be working in concert with these geopolitical shifts to bring about the moment long feared or long awaited. But for now, one truth remains: prophecy doesn't fade. It waits. It waits for a generation willing to see it not as myth, but as map. When examining the recent developments between Russia and Iran, particularly in the light of their military and strategic alignment, it becomes increasingly difficult to dismiss the possibility that we are witnessing the unfolding of something ancient, something foretold. As this alignment intensifies, with joint exercises, arms deals, and shared ideological disdain for Western hegemony, prophecy scholars and secular analysts alike begin to converge on a chilling question: are we watching the precursors to the war of Gog and Magog, described vividly in Ezekiel 38? Russia, the modern face of ancient Rosh in some biblical interpretations, has not only resurged from the shadows of the Cold War, but is also actively redefining its sphere of influence. Vladimir Putin's government has become increasingly entangled in the Middle East, establishing military bases in Syria and solidifying partnerships with nations that were once on the periphery of Russian interest. This resurgence is not random. It is calculated, deliberate, and in some cases, religiously motivated. Russian Orthodox leaders have often framed these actions in the language of divine destiny and cultural reclamation. They believe they are standing against a morally declining West. Iran, on the other hand, with its Shia eschatology deeply rooted in the arrival of the Mahdi, a messianic figure believed to emerge during global chaos, sees its military ambitions as part of a divine script. Their leadership has openly spoken of hastening the end times. This isn't just geopolitical strategy, it's spiritual warfare on a global scale. When these two powers, each bearing its own apocalyptic vision, form a pact, the potential consequences transcend politics. Together, Russia and Iran have created a corridor of influence stretching from the Caspian Sea to the Mediterranean. Their support for proxies like Hezbollah and various Shia militias, coupled with Russia's air power and cyber capabilities, has created a new axis of power. Israel, aware of this looming threat, has ramped up both its military readiness and its diplomatic engagements. It knows that it could become the spark in this prophetic powder keg. Ezekiel 38 speaks of a coalition from the far north that descends upon Israel in the latter days, with Persia, modern-day Iran, as a key player. The alliance described is not a ragtag rebellion, but a formidable force, united in purpose and seemingly unstoppable. But the prophecy does not end in Israel's destruction. Rather, it culminates in divine intervention, a moment when the world will know that the God of Israel has acted. It's worth noting that the prophecy includes several unusual features: a massive army equipped for war, an invasion motivated not by resources alone but by an evil scheme, and an outcome where nature itself turns against the invaders. Hailstones, earthquakes, fire, and brimstone, all marks of divine judgment. The implication is clear: this war is not just geopolitical, it is cosmic. The timing is also telling. Many scholars argue that the Ezekiel 38 war happens either right before or at the beginning of the tribulation period, a 7-year span of global turmoil described in the book of Revelation. If that's the case, and if we are indeed seeing the early signs of this alignment, then the world stands closer than ever to the most transformative period in human history. Beyond religious texts, intelligence communities are paying close attention. Reports indicate increased satellite activity over Iranian and Russian facilities, suggestions of weapon transfers, and enhanced cyber cooperation. These aren't rumors, they are confirmed observations. Add to that the mounting pressure from NATO, China's silent approval, and the Biden administration's attempt to recalibrate American influence in the region. And the stage is not just set, it's trembling. But what makes this moment uniquely dangerous is the spiritual blindness of many global leaders. While military analysts focus on tactics and supply chains, and diplomats issue vague condemnations or offers of mediation, very few are willing to acknowledge that these alliances may have metaphysical roots, that they are not just about power, but about destiny. One of the most telling indicators of prophetic significance lies in the suddenness with which these developments have accelerated. Just a decade ago, such a Russia-Iran alliance seemed improbable. Their religious, political, and cultural differences were too vast. And yet, today they stand shoulder to shoulder, not only against Israel but against a world order they both see as corrupt and godless. In parallel, we observe strange phenomena that seem to echo biblical warnings. Unprecedented natural disasters, global economic instability, and a cultural shift that increasingly mirrors the moral decline described in prophetic scriptures. These signs are not isolated. They form a mosaic that, when viewed with discernment, appears eerily familiar. So where does this leave us? In a world veering toward confrontation, where alliances are no longer built on ideology alone but on eschatological visions, we must begin to ask deeper questions. Are the moves we see on the geopolitical chessboard merely strategy, or are they fulfillment? Is Russia's involvement in Syria, Iran's obsession with nuclear capability, and Israel's increasing isolation merely coincidence or convergence? And more critically, what is our response? If we are indeed witnessing the precursor to the war of Gog and Magog, then the stakes are not just for nations, but for souls. The Bible states that God allows this war not just for judgment, but for revelation, that the nations may know He is the Lord. It is both a warning and an invitation. In light of this, silence is not an option. Whether one believes in prophecy or not, the facts on the ground demand attention. The echoes of Ezekiel 38 are growing louder. Perhaps we are not meant to predict the exact moment or decipher every symbol, but we are certainly called to watch, to discern, and to prepare. Because if the Crimson Pact between Russia and Iran is more than political theater, if it is the ignition of ancient prophecy, then we may be closer to the final chapter than we dare imagine.